Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brad with Megan, as usual, and today we have special guest Jim Nelson from FRSecure with us. How are you doing today, Jim?
Good. Thanks, Brad. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So before we get going into it, we always like to start with our what are we doing for fun outside of work? Uh, I've been doing some video gaming and wrapping up the kind of finishing details on my Millennium Falcon. It's
hmm
uh, it's got the remote working, so I can remotely do my lights and my ramp. So almost done with that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with myself after that, but it's fun. I've had a really good time doing it. What
Nice.
about you, Megan? What do you got? What are you doing?
So that sounds like a good problem to have. Um, I'll say I've been playing some video games too. I've been getting into the Switch game Fantasy Life. It's been kind of fun to play, leveling up all the different jobs that you can have in the story, and it's cute. And my son surprisingly started playing it like crazy, as well as my mom and my brother. So it lets you online play and do dungeons together. So that's been kind of fun
That's fun.
connecting with them and going through some of those things. And then the other piece I've been doing is kind of helping my daughter set up her fish tank with success and failure, but it's getting there.
Nice. Yeah, I need to do some maintenance. I've been putting it off on my tank, so
Yeah.
it's a little bit grimy right now, but oh well.
Yeah.
How about you, Jim?
Yeah, well, I live in Western Montana, so my my video game, sort of diet is really not there anymore. I mean, I'm outside a lot, so we're hiking and just enjoying the beautiful country out here. That's really what I do on my downtime. When I'm not on my computer all day, trying to fight the good fight for security. Uh, so I think this weekend, even, we'll probably be outdoors. It's actually been really, really nice here. And uh, typically we have a lot of smoke, and fire season was very, very minimal, this year. So that's been a blessing, because in August and early September, it's usually infested with smoke and you kind of want to stay inside. So we
Not the
haven't had
healthiest
that.
for you.
Yeah. So that's been great. Yeah, that's been great.
Very cool. So we'll get going. Jim is kind of our I don't know, resident subject matter expert, I guess, for our cloud assessment, cloud infrastructure. So that's what we're going to talk about today is cloud and how do you prepare and what should you be doing. Um, I think I'll let you kind of run with this, Jim, and I'm just going to ask you, with all the assessments that you've done, maybe give us the top three things that people are missing that they should be doing, and maybe the three things that people are doing well. If you can come up with three that they're doing well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And as a, subject matter expert, I know what that means. That's really, I know enough to know that I don't know everything, especially with cloud security. I mean, so it's an ongoing dynamic, uh, uh, lifelong learning endeavor. It's a passion I have, and it's a kind of a niche over the last 7-8 years, and it's been fun, and so, yeah, I mean, I think, there's doing all these cloud security assessments, and largely using the CIS benchmarks, sort of as our baseline checkpoint. Yeah, over the years, I've learned a lot myself, and then being in these client environments, you see things that most of the clients are doing well, and you see things that they are not. I think, you know some of the things that they are not, what leads them to not, is not necessarily intentional, but it's the mindset of, uh, it was spun up, largely by, a third party some years ago. They contracted out with an IT service firm. They set up their tenant, and then they just sort of by default trusted that it was set up, configured properly. And uh, so kind of that set it and forget it mentality. And then we come in and do an overall health check, for them, and find things. Oh, I didn't know that, or I wasn't aware that, that configuration was possible. Whatever it was, that's sort of led them to be at the state where they were. So, definitely not intentional. Nobody wants to not be secure, but that's kind of what I'm finding from a high level that's driving, the misconfigurations, if that makes sense. So, I think with that said, one thing that comes to mind that I see a lot, is with in infrastructure. So if they've got an infrastructure presence in Azure or AWS, they've got in AWS they've got storage account or storage buckets or S3, or in AWS they call them storage accounts or blobs or containers, within them, and they spin those up, but they sometimes fail to realize that there's, when there's an API call into them, there's a configuration that only allows HTTPS, encrypted traffic. That gets missed a lot, so it allows both. It allows HTTPS and unencrypted HTTP, and so that's a that's a high risk, and that I see that one a lot, so we point that out.
But Jim, it's AWS or Azure. They're secure.
Well, that's
probably pretty secure, but I think you hit on it though, right? A lot of people, that is their thought, is I put it in the cloud, so I'm secured.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft or Amazon, and that's not the case. You do have to. You're responsible for securing your instance.
Correct. Yep. So that is one, that's probably the most top of mind. A lot of people, they look at their authentication, plane, whether they use the identity and access management in AWS or they're using Entra ID. That's sort of their first thought. So I'm kind of dipping into another area where I think that the focus is probably better as time goes by, which is the authentication plane. So I see people doing that fairly well these days. So they're looking at their user groups. They're getting them grouped properly. Then they're applying the access permissions in those groups, better and better. They're leveraging the conditional access policies, in Entra ID. They're syncing with either Entra ID or a similar auth plane in AWS now, or they're using a federated, MFA Duo, for example, over top. That identity and access piece is getting better. So there's one good thing, and then there's one thing that's not so good.
I think one interesting topic to discuss, and it's broader than just cloud perspective, is kind of like you hit on earlier, is you kind of trust that third party expert to set up your configuration securely. But I think the hole that we see over and over again with that is they don't know your environment and how you're going to use it as well as you do. And not only that, but it changes over time. So it's not even that they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to set you up securely. But sometimes that means asking the right questions, giving them the right information about how you're going to use it, and then understanding that how you use it is going to change over time. And so maybe what was once secure, when you popped another hole in it or added another bucket for storage, the configurations that maybe were there weren't any longer. And also from the Microsoft, Azure, and maybe even the vendor, they want it to work first and be secure also. But if they think that might potentially block, or if they've run into issues with clients in the past where, oh, well, they needed HTTP open as well, they just leave it open. They'll let you turn it off.
Well, that's a great point. And what happens is that whatever that security configuration profile was originally, mm-hmm. any subsequent S3 buckets or storage blobs that get created, that configuration applies. And if they don't understand that, then, then they've downstream, they've got the same configurations on all of those.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe they even had to make some exceptions to what would have otherwise been some security protocols that then need to be reevaluated when you add that new
Yeah.
storage.
Yeah. And it's a good point, because they'll spin up another S3 bucket, that may have more critical data than the other ones before, and if they're not careful, that one needs to have some more specific security configurations applied to it, than the previous.
I imagine that might even be a fairly common scenario where you start with less sensitive data first, and then you add
Mm-hmm.
more sensitive data later on.
Yeah. Yeah. And another area that I consistently find that clients are just not doing is the monitoring and logging component.
Oh yeah.
All the time, so the CIS benchmarks have 14 or 15, whether you're in Azure or AWS or even, GCP, suggested best practice monitoring and logging and alerting metrics. And those are often not thought of. So when I go in there and I look at their monitoring and logging, like for example, in AWS, they may have some monitoring, but it's all about functionality. So performance, operability, latency, on their applications, that are hosted there, and any of the databases on the back end that are talking to those customer facing applications. Obviously, that's their bread and butter. That's what's most important to them. So they do have some of those, performance and configurations that are there, and for monitoring and logging. But what they don't do is have, for example, hey, any admin changes to a policy, any like access control lists and security groups in AWS, for example.
Changes
Same is
to
true on the Azure side. Any changes to those are not alerted upon, not even monitored half the time. So I see that all the time. So for the security mindset for monitoring and logging is still just in large part not there.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go in and do the cloud assessments and point that out, I think that's a huge benefit, to put a spotlight on that and say, hey, this from a security standpoint, you should be doing that. And a couple of things about that is that you first have to kick off the logging of it. Even that is not there. So there's a logging metric that you have to set up for those things to make sure that it's logging it, because you can't set an alert on something that you're not logging. So those little nuances under that whole bucket of monitoring and logging, yeah, I see that pretty much every time.
Does the logging and monitoring features, I think I've understood in the past, and I don't know if it's still this way, does that add costs typically to their cloud environment subscriptions?
It's the cost part comes in when you're logging it. You got to point it to store it
Mm-hmm.
in either like an S3 bucket or an Azure blob container, a storage blob container. That can incur some costs for storing logs. But then once you
They have APIs available for like if you have a SIM solution.
oh yeah,
That takes away cost, right? And you
Yeah.
would want it centralized anyway.
You don't
yeah,
want to go through those logs manually.
yeah. Like in Azure, they've got their Azure Sentinel, not to be confused with Sentinel-1,
Right.
but their Sentinel SIEM is their their version of their cloud SIEM tool. There are some clients that are ingesting those logs in Azure Sentinel, but then Azure Sentinel incurs a cost, obviously, to pay and play to use that. But yeah, that's where the cost comes in. Once you have the log, then you can configure an alerting metric on it to detect any changes to those kinds of things. Again, they've got just very minimal logs that are sort of capturing the function of their infrastructure, so that they can make sure that any latency issues, bandwidth issues, those things can be, detected and alerted, and then, course corrected very quick. But
Yeah.
that's pretty much it.
Probably some logging alerting on just usage, the things that'll cost them more money too, right? How they're utilizing the cloud. Yep.
Yeah. Or, obviously if they've got, customer dissatisfaction, it's going to come in their performance, and they don't want that because
You
it's,
want, yeah. You want to be ahead of that.
Yep.
So one of the things that you did that I think is really good is we put out a cloud infrastructure, like kind of a baseline security best practice, regardless of what tool you're using. Obviously, you would have to go in and know your tool to be able to change these things. But talk a little bit about how you decided to come up with the best practices that you listed. Because we know it's based off CIS, and that can be exhaustive. And this is a easy to digest list. So obviously we'll make sure marketing puts a link to that out when they publish this. But go talk a little bit about your mindset and thought process when you were creating it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just over the years, seeing what some of the weak points are that I consistently see in all the client tenants, and the clients that we've served over the years. That really was the driving force behind it. Coupled with the benchmarks, the CIS benchmarks as a baseline, not fully the CIS benchmarks. I mean, obviously you've got the security baselines that are in there that Microsoft can report back to you on for Azure and M365, and AWS has their own, like M365 and Azure has their secure score that they call it. So I do look at those things, and AWS has their own security, sort of similar tool as well that you can sort of look at. And it'll report back some misconfigurations. So that just coupled with best practices over the years, from my experience, is what came in to develop this. There's several categories. There's identity access management, email and collaboration security, touching on some of these things, some of them are just, best security practices in general. We at FRSecure are very, sort of tied to the CISSP, sort of framework. That sort of came into focus as well too as I developed this. So then you've got network security, data protection. That category specifically, is lack of a better term, it's blowing up with possibilities. With the onset of like Microsoft Purview and other tools that could hook in to that environment, like other sort of data governance solutions, like maybe Varonis. Whereas 2 years before, that just kind of wasn't there. So because of that, I included a section on data protection. And one of those areas was implement data loss prevention policies. It's becoming a lot more easier now to manage data. It's almost flipped it on its head, where now you can actually go and discover it, at a very granular level. If you don't know where all of and this is another sort of area, sort of to hit on. Sorry to go off on a tangent, but it's kind of a recent passion of mine, is the whole data governance subject. Well, now, whereas before, it would be a largely, like a manual effort, where you would have to go in and try to figure out, okay, where's the shadow IT that the IT department doesn't know about? And let's go talk to all the department heads and, try to figure this out. You can use spreadsheets to hit on that and do all that manually. But now, with all these tools like Purview and other products, of course, at FRSecure, we're industry agnostic, we're product agnostic. We don't, have any partnerships with these folks. But we try to do our level best to say, hey, here's what tool looks like might be working, and from what we're seeing, these tools are now able to go in, discover your data. All of our clients have unstructured, even sensitive and classified data, everywhere. And now you have the ability to sort of do it all in reverse. You can discover it at the granular level, then you can push policies, label it, do all those things. So that I put that in there as one thing to look at. I'm just sort of like going down my list now, configuration management, monitoring and logging. We touched on that, vulnerability management. So, all these sort of, good hallmark security subjects are included in there. But that's kind of, to answer your question, Brad. I mean, that those are some of the things that came into feed where I came up with this list.
Cool. So
I
you
think,
can hear you are passionate about it. It really comes out. So it's awesome.
cool. Yeah, thanks. I love what I do. Another area that came to mind in terms of, I think I hit on two of them, which was the HTTP configurations as well as the monitoring and logging. I think a third one that is an area of concern that I don't really see covered is, vulnerability management in that infrastructure. So in a large part, within M365, a lot of folks are leveraging, Intune to push out, patches and intersect with that environment, whether it's Intune or whatever, what other RMM tool or any, central patch management tool that they're using. But when they have infrastructure, they've got VMs, they've got, SQL databases, they've got these storage blobs or S3 buckets. They're not thinking about that those instances that are spun up, they've got an operating system. Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean you can set it and forget it. You're responsible for making sure that those instances, that virtual environment stays current. And so now, like in Azure and M365, I should say like in Azure, Microsoft Defender for Cloud does have that Defender for Endpoint has that capability to do what they call their vulnerability assessment. So they're going to give that look and scan those instances just like you would if you hooked in like Nessus or Qualys in there. But for the most part, clients aren't doing that or leveraging, Defender for Endpoint because that's a cost incurrence. Mm-hmm. Or they're not doing scans from a third party, hooked into Azure and AWS to report back, what's missing. So that's another area that I think, we point that out in our assessments and explain it to them.
Yeah, those are your key critical systems frequently. So same as you would if they were on-prem or not, you got to scan them and monitor them, make sure they're protected, not just assume that the attackers are never going to reach those systems because they find ways.
Well, if it's connected to the network, the attackers have a way to get to it. So yeah, you can't just say it's in the cloud, so I'm safe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If that loops back, and I guess to the what we're doing when we're looking at conditional access policies, in Entra ID especially, so if that, for example, if they've got an engineering team group in there, that they've got Azure DevOps that they're using and they've got access to those resources, if that individual gets phished or if that, those credentials get compromised in any way, there's the gap, there's the loophole in there. And if that resource has vulnerabilities that hasn't had a vulnerability, assessment or a vulnerability scanning done on them, those will get exploited.
Yeah, I think that's a good one too, is conditional access. We've seen it. I've had some clients where, the user clicked and they had a new device added, right? Yeah, it's a pain, but you really should have any new device needs to be approved before it connects.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And yeah, I mean, I think that's, I was actually looking at my identity and access management bullet points, and that's one probably that could be added. I mean, you can configure conditional access policies to not allow that new device to be added, through like device code flow conditions and other things. And it's not really that hard to do. It's just, letting them know that, hey, this is actually a thing, and it's available to you. That's a
Yeah.
great point.
From an IT perspective and admin side of it, you're not having to approve all the existing devices. You should probably review them and make sure that there aren't any suspicious ones there. But when you turn that on, it's simply when there's a new device that attempts to connect. So your overhead is going to be when you're setting up new computers for people or if they get a new phone. But quite frankly, that's going to be significantly less of a headache and work than an incident.
Right.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
even just
yeah.
trying to remember and notice when a new device has been added without your permission. When did that happen?
Well, yeah, and what this pings me, another really cool feature that I'm pushing hard for when I'm talking to our clients is the session token evaluation feature. They call it the continuous access evaluation, or the CAE. In the session features in conditional access, to ensure that that is on. Is not going to it's not going to tax the user. It's not going to eliminate their day-to-day functions. What it does do is that it almost in real time will continually evaluate that session token bind. So I'm geeking out a little bit, to that authorized device. And at any time that token gets, unbound or attempted to bind to another device, it kills it immediately.
Okay. You mean a session shouldn't be suddenly going from somewhere in the U.S. to somewhere in, Eastern Europe?
Yeah, basically.
One state to another.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really that within maybe the last 12 to I can't remember, maybe 18 months ago, that started to roll out. Microsoft started to roll out that feature, and it was a little buggy at first, but right now I think it's pretty solid to be able to kick that off in the conditions and conditional access policies. Then, of course, there's I have a section there for email and collaboration security. We do find that all of the safe attachment features that are there, and a lot of our clients are going to Defender these days. Some of them are still using Mimecast and other email filtering tools that are sitting over top of their Exchange environment. But we just want to make sure that, hey, you've got all the DKIM and the DMARC records configured properly, the SPF records that are published. So we have that list there to make sure that they look for those things.
Did you see that Microsoft added a malicious link warning in Teams?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
We'll see how that actually plays out. But basically, it sounds like if anybody has reported the link and it's been reviewed, it will warn users. So we'll see what happens on that, but at least they're doing something.
Yeah. I have full trust of known bad links.
Of course, I'm going down these links and I'm revisiting all the assessments that I've done over the years, and it's like, oh yeah, I see, like, for application services, those web applications are not using the TLS 1.2 or higher encryption. We point that out, so I think this checklist does serve as a good marker to go back and say, hey, let's look at all of these and see if it's configured properly. Another cool thing too is the compliance and governance subject that I put on there on the checklist, where now with the security and compliance features, in Azure, the Microsoft world, and security compliance in AWS and GCP, there are those sort of preset standards that you can just check a box. If you want to check your configurations against NIST, or you want to check them against, ISO, ISMS 27000 series, or if you want to check them against CGIS compliance or FERPA, those are those are relatively all there now. So you can just check that box, and it's a real low cost incurrence. And then it'll report back against those standards, what's configured properly and what isn't.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I, kind of coming up on time here, but I think the takeaway is, from my opinion, or my side of things, perspective. That's the word I was looking for. If you want to be defensible in your cloud security, you should be doing what's on that list at a minimum.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree. Yep. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. That's a good summation. Yeah.
And
Making
then
any
taking a look at that and continuing to review your security posture, as with anything, right? Because even as Brad and I were talking on the previous time with policies, they change over time. And so you got to keep following up with them, whether it's the configurations of the cloud hosts themselves or how you're using it. So keep reassessing your environment so they can use the list that we've provided, or if they want to go into more depth and specifics, they can check out the CIS benchmarks, which is Center for Information Security benchmarks. They're quite robust and updated pretty frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they sure are. Yeah, that's a good point you make, because we don't know what we don't know. And so when we come in and do a cloud security review, or if you leverage this checklist, now there's an educational piece that, okay, these are sort of the baselines. What do I have configured properly, or what don't I have configured properly now in point in time, so that then they can be informed to then make that risk decision. Okay, do we pay for it? Do we not? Now we know the risk, and yeah, that's a very important aspect.
Very cool. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. We always like to wrap up with a shout out or gratitude. I'll go first, so you have a little chance to think about it. I'll give a shout out to my daughter. She got in her first acceptance for college as a high school senior, so she is
Nice.
officially costing us more money. But no, she's very happy with it. I'm happy with the school, so shout out to her. Megan, you got one?
Yeah, I actually thought I'd just do a shout out to ISC2 or Squared. They put on a women's summit. I believe it was the first one just yesterday. And myself and another colleague joined and listened to the sessions. And I just thought it was so well done. The speakers were amazing. So kudos to all the speakers on that. Lots of good information. Kind of just everything from, continuing to aspire and grow in the field, as well as call outs and shout outs to all the women to keep growing and coming into the information security space, because we need lots of perspectives, and that's one that's called out. And I think they were saying, there's still just like 22% women in the information security field. And so we want to keep seeing that grow, and it's exciting to hear from so many inspirational women. And so it was just overall very highlight of what was already a pretty great week.
Nice. How about you, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I got to give a shout out to my wife, and she is amazing. I'm blessed to be married to such an amazing woman. So
Nice.
all that I do here, is inextricably tied to our relationship. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We've got Hacks and Hops coming up. We've got a couple other episodes coming up. We got a very special one, surprise for our 250th episode coming up I believe in October, if I'm not mistaken. So looking forward to that. Keep tuning in for that surprise. I'm pretty excited about what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Should be a blast.
Anything else, Megan, that I missed?
I don't think so. Yeah, looks like we'll have another colleague of ours, Seth Bowling, on the next episode. So stay tuned as usual.
All right. Thank you, everyone.